Afternoon, good evening, depending on what part of the world you're in. Welcome to the monthly Roundtable breakfast, co-sponsored by the Association for Conflict Resolution of Greater New York and the City University of New York Dispute Resolution Center at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. I'm Maria Volpe. I'm a professor of sociology at John Jay College, where I also direct the Dispute Resolution Program, which is an undergraduate program for our students to learn conflict resolution skills, and the CUNY Dispute Resolution Center. We've been holding these breakfasts since 9/11, and some of you have been with us since the beginning, and for some of you, this is your first time here, so that's why I share our roots. We met in person at John Jay College in Manhattan until March 2020, starting April 2020, at the beginning of the pandemic. We started meeting online, and here we are. We still continue. Some of you have been asking whether we will ever go back in person. We still have not had large gatherings on campus. So, and there are all the precautions around the pandemic. So for the time being, we will continue until further notice to hold these breakfasts online. These breakfasts are recorded, and the recordings are available at the moment at the acrgny.org website. We are close to upgrading our website at the CUNY DRC, so we'll have them double posted in the very near future. Each month, these breakfasts are put together by a wonderful team, including Julie Denny, Matthew Latimer, Nikki Borofsky, Emily Skinner. It is truly an amazing group to work with each month to make sure that this happens. One of our co-conveners, as many of you know, passed on May 17th. And we just spent the earlier part of this session talking about the contributions of Chuck Newman to this breakfast and to the field. And he was a pillar of the New York City dispute resolution community. And we miss him sorely. For those of you who've been on the listserv, saw the outpouring of love and admiration for his contributions over the years. We do sorely miss him, and hope that all of you embrace each other the way he embraced everyone. He felt the warmth of the field and talked about how he was embraced as a litigator when he came to particularly the mediation field, and was hoping that we would pass on the message of how important it is for us to continue doing that to all those who are interested in the work of this field. And with that, I usually turn it over to Julie, but Julie is in Wyoming and her internet is very unstable this morning. So I'm delighted to turn it over to Emily Skinner, who will introduce our wonderful speaker this morning, Zoe Chance, who will share with us some important insights from her new book. And I'll leave it, turn it over to Emily to give us a more formal introduction. Zoe, we're just so thrilled to have you here with us and looking forward to spending the next hour and a half with you. Emily?
Thank you, Maria. Good morning, everybody. My name is Emily Skinner. I'm the president-elect at ACRGNY. I'm super excited to spend this morning with you and to introduce Zoe Chance. Zoe Chance is a writer, teacher, researcher, and climate philanthropist. She's obsessed with the topic of interpersonal influence, and her best-selling book, published in 28 languages, is called Influence is Your Superpower: The Science of Winning Hearts, Sparking Change, and Making Good Things Happen. Zoe earned her doctorate from Harvard and now teaches at the Yale School of Management. Her research is published in top academic journals and covered in global media outlets. She speaks on television and around the world, and her framework for behavior change is the foundation for Google's global food policy. Before joining academia, Zoe managed 200 million segment of Barbie brand and helped out with political campaigns and worked in less glamorous influence jobs like door-to-door sales and telemarketing. Zoe wrote Influence is Your Superpower based on her course at Yale School of Management, Mastering Influence and Persuasion. A popular course at the business school, students had informally dubbed it Doing Uncomfortable Things That Make You a Better Person. She created the class because she had watched her favorite people, kind, humble, intelligent, and creative, struggle because they were uncomfortable asking for their great ideas to be recognized and their hard work to be rewarded. Influence is power, and it tends to go to power-hungry people who are more likely to study and practice it. She wanted to help shift that balance of power, empowering the quiet voices, the servant leaders, and the idealists. Behavioral scientist and former marketing and sales practitioner, she pulled together the most helpful things she has learned and put them together in her book. So I want to give a huge warm welcome to Zoe Chance here to the breakfast, and we're going to open it up into kind of a fireside chat. And I have the first question that I'll share with you, Zoe, is I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about how you came to write Influence is Your Superpower.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you, Maria. Good morning, everybody. I don't always wear sunglasses. It's not that I think I'm such a diva now that I wrote this book, and I don't want people in my house to recognize it. I just have an eye issue, so thank you for your tolerance. And I'm just really glad to meet you, and I'm excited that this will be an interactive session because all of us here are in the influence field, and there's so much that I can learn from you as well. So as we're interacting, and you can ask questions, and also just feel free to jump in and share your advice with me and with other people. It'll be great. I wrote this book because I had just been feeling like it's not fair to keep this powerful kind of knowledge and practice. And when I say powerful, it influences power, right? To keep this in the ivory tower. And it's not like there aren't other ways to learn influence. However, there just aren't that many courses on it. And the course that I developed at Yale School of Management was the first course like this in any business school anywhere. I developed it because when I was an MBA student, there wasn't that much that I learned that was practical, but I had been obsessed with learning about interpersonal influence, not because I was so great at it, because I sucked at it. I was very shy as a young person. And then I worked in theater and sales, working on learning how to relate to people. But then when I worked at Mattel as a junior manager, I was still frustrated with how little influence I had, despite doing painstaking analyses and sharing great ideas and working so hard. And I came back to school at Harvard to study the behavioral science of how do people really make decisions? How does behavior really work? And then I created this class and wrote the book so that more people could have access to the knowledge than my lovely students in the ivory tower.
Right. So we would like to ask you some more questions about your book. It focuses on how one can increase influence in the world. Can you tell us how one can do that? How can we influence others in the world?
I can share as we have this session together. I'm sure I'll share plenty of science and specific strategies. But Maria, I loved how you shared just before this session started where the breakfasts came from. And more often than not, what influence looks like is just somebody being willing to step up and do the thing. This is what leadership is just somebody being willing to do the organizing and do the work. So you said 9/11 happened, and you're well situated to be a convener, but you also should. The convening is a lot of work, right? And it takes a lot of dedication and marshaling of resources and coordinating. And you've done this for decades. And I heard from other people who were here before we started how grateful they are. So influence is, yes, it's a science. It's really not rocket science. And this is almost embarrassing, but when I teach this 7-week boot camp class at Yale School of Management, it's the most popular class every year. Well, I don't know now that I have this book, but last year 600 people applied for it across the university. And we do so much that's, legitimate academic science, all that. But then at the end of 7 weeks, students all come up one by one to share in front of the class the biggest, best thing they're taking away. And the number one most common thing that people share is just ask. I learned to just ask. And when I say that to you, like, for God's sake, you're in conflict resolution, you know this, right? You're also professionals in your career. So whatever career you were in, you should know this already. Actually, if you were 10, you should know this already. But what happens when we start asking as a more deliberate practice is almost all of us realize we could have been doing a hell of a lot more of it. We could have been asking more people. We could have been asking more often. We could have been asking for bigger things than what we thought was on the table. We could have been asking for things we didn't expect to get, because along with learning about the power of asking, a big reason for that is that we discover how miscalibrated we are. And people are 2 or 3 times more likely to say yes than we anticipate that they will be. And this is empirically through series of experiments. The main person doing this work is Vanessa Bonds at Cornell. And one of the reasons, I love this, so I think you'll enjoy this little fact. One of the reasons that we underestimate how influential we already are when we ask is that we underestimate how much people like us. There's a liking gap of 12%, where when you put 2 strangers in a room and you have them have a conversation with each other, they then say how much they liked each other, the other person, and they guess how much the other person liked them. And I should say this is strangers in a day-to-day context. This is not strangers in a conflict situation. We'll talk more about that. But in day-to-day context, we just underestimate how likable and charming and adorable we are by about 12%. So this is a long way of saying becoming influential starts with stepping up. And it really, really starts with just asking. And we can talk about lots more of it. But we actually wouldn't have to learn any of the complicated science if we just do more of the practice. And as we're talking about all of this, I hope that when you're listening, you can listen from the perspective of what in this conversation might be helpful for me, but also what in this conversation might be helpful for me to share with other people. Because I believe you wouldn't have gotten into the field of conflict resolution as the whole or the part of what you do enough to come here if you didn't really care about helping other people. And I appreciate you all for that.
So Matthew's going to ask.
Yeah, Zoe.
the next question.
Oh, go ahead.
And I was just saying, I'm sorry, who's speaking?
Harvey. I want to say something to Zoe. I never heard that research about underestimating. It's fascinating, though, because I think we underestimate the good and we overestimate the bad. And I think this is hardwired into us as an evolutionary need. But we have to turn that around in the 21st century, finally.
Yes, Harvey, thank you. And we overestimate the bad, underestimate the good in a lot of different contexts. And this happens specifically in written communication, where a reader will interpret more aggression and less warmth than a writer intended writing messages. So when we're writing to each other, especially in fraught situations, but whether it's formal or informal, it's helpful just to take into account if I feel warmly toward this person, or I'm wanting to have this person feel comfortable, I'm not trying to aggress. We need to be really mindful of how we communicate. And power differences have a big impact here. And in, of course, lots of other influence situations. And Like now that I'm a professor, I don't have to worry too much about coming across too informally when I communicate. So I can use lots of exclamation points and emoticons and things like that that I wouldn't have used when I was earlier in my career. But even then, just actively expressing warmth. And, there's situations where two sides are angry with each other, right? And warmth might be too much to ask, but at the very least, just letting people know, hey, this other person who disagrees with you on this issue and feels in conflict with you, if you don't want them to perceive you as being aggressive, you need to be very, very careful about communicating with them in an open and polite way, because they're going to interpret it even more than you think. And actually, Harvey, this maybe is a good time to mention research for people who might not be familiar with it on what's called the false polarization bias. And maybe people here know about it, but if you don't, this is super relevant to you. The false polarization bias is a psychological bias that all of us have, where when somebody disagrees with us, we tend to caricature them and believe that their views would be on the extreme opposite end from ours. But the reality is that our differences are much smaller than our zones of agreement. And even in research on politics in the United States, where, of course, Democrats and Republicans have a lot to disagree about, the media really amplifies those zones of disagreement and minimizes zones of agreement. So when you ask people about hot button issues like gun control and immigration, the truth is that there's more overlap than there is difference between the two parties, but each party perceives someone from the other party to be radical or to be reactionary. And I wish that there was more discussion of the commonalities that we have. Gun control is so easy to solve if it were just by collective consensus, because we all want to have less gun violence, for example, and we all want to have less abortion. Nobody wants to have an abortion, right? But we disagree about how to get there. And just because news is run on, we'll talk more about visceral influences and gut reactions, but because news likes drama, the media likes to create divisiveness where it doesn't exist.
Zoe, one of the important points that you're making is about what I've come to call the likability factor. And one of my research projects on barriers to minority participation in the field, one of our participants referred to how important the likability factor is for people, particularly in the mediation field, that you have to be approachable and likable. Otherwise, it's hard for parties to sit behind closed doors with that third party and for that third party to gain their trust. And so it's interesting how this is a really important topic for those on this call who I think in their own way, whether consciously or unconsciously, think about the likability factor. They need to be likable to the parties who are in the room. Otherwise, it's going to be hard to convene those individuals.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the likability factor is important for mediators and important for anyone in any field. It can't be overestimated how important it is to have someone else's gut reaction to you be positive. And also, you're helping me understand. It's so funny. This is just personal share. But when I was getting divorced, we started working with a mediator and met with her a number of times, and it just kind of devolved. And then we left it for 4 years. So we actually got divorced, and we had a good divorce. We have a great relationship. But the mediator wasn't likable, and neither of us liked her. And those were very unpleasant meetings. And now I'm realizing like maybe that's all it was that had that whole process get derailed because it was unpleasant for us to show up and go talk to her. And yeah, we needed a little more comfort. And and the divorce attorney that we ended up hiring, both of us together, we used the same one, was talking about how important it is to have candy on your desk. It's kind of like in the middle of both parties when you're meeting with people in a contentious situation. And he said he learned that from a judge that was judging divorce cases, and it wouldn't be just divorce, but it's so funny how much tiny little things like this make a difference. And also, by the way, Rita, this quote, "If you don't ask, you don't get," I never heard that was Gandhi. Is that actually Gandhi? Okay, I don't know if you're on if you can talk out loud, but that's hilarious if that's a Gandhi quote. And anybody, everybody, please join in the chat. You can make comments, ask questions, answer each other's questions, talk smack, tease each other, whatever you want. It's a good place to be interactive.
So Matthew? is
Great.
next.
So I have one question about, you describe people as having either gator or judge personalities. So can you talk a little bit more about that? What does that mean?
Yes, absolutely. And also I'll just mention DK is speaking up to say we all want less abortion is false. I think that I said that in a brusque sort of way. Just nobody sets out to have an abortion. We would prefer to not have to have abortions. And then many of us, very much including me, want everyone who wants and needs an abortion to get one. So that was all that I meant, is abortion is not this in itself desirable situation, but I know we don't want to derail into an abortion conversation. So for anyone who I offended, I apologize. About the gator and the judge. This is, to me, the most important fundamental psychological framework that can help us understand how influence works. And I draw this from the field of behavioral economics, which is my research background. You might not, or you might be familiar with behavioral economics. It's basically the love child of psychology and economics, where it's interested in the mental processes that yield social behaviors. And by social behaviors, this can be economic behaviors, it can be violence, politics, marriage, anything that we're doing with each other. And in behavioral economics, there is this analogy. It's not anatomy, but there's this analogy that explains 100% of decisions and behavior with the idea that there are two systems working together, sometimes in collaboration, sometimes in conflict. And these two systems, behavioral economists call rather uncreatively system one and system two. For anyone who might have read or who might have owned and not read because it's 800 pages, Danny Kahneman's book called Thinking Fast and Slow, the fast and slow are system one and system two. And I use this analogy that's more concrete to help it be stickier, because when I teach behavioral economics, people forget what system one and system two. And even if I teach it to you and it makes sense, then you go and try to teach it to someone else and they're like, so I use the analogy of a gator and a judge. And I want to share slides here to make this super concrete so it can stick in your mind. Well, all of a sudden my slides are just not opening from the share. Why is this? It was there a moment ago. I love Zoom. Don't you love Zoom?
Mhm. It wouldn't be a Zoom call if we didn't have a Zoom moment of one sort or another, right?
Right? Yeah. All right. Well, we're not going to have the slides, but it doesn't matter. And by gator, alligator. Yes. So I'll just explain. The idea is that there is this unconscious system that's the first responder, gut reaction, instantaneous, and for the most part, unconscious process that is far more powerful than we imagine it to be. And the reason why I use the analogy of a gator is probably not what you would think about a gator, whatever the qualities are that pop first to mind. The distinguishing feature of alligators versus other kinds of creatures on Earth is that they're the most efficient that at least I'm aware of. They evolved 38 million years ago, and they have become so efficient that they have brain the size of a walnut, body weighs up to half a pound, and they can go up to 3 years without eating anything at all. So I would think of them as being these bloodthirsty, scary beasts that if, say, you get to feed them, which I did, and you can throw chunks of raw meat their way, that they're just going to Clash of the Titans. But no, it's the opposite. If you don't get it in their bite zone, which is the area between the nose and the tail, where they can reach it without moving their body, but just their head. If you don't get it in their bite zone, even if it's just a centimeter outside, a pile of alligators will just sit there, do nothing until a bird comes down to grab that piece of meat. If you get the piece of meat within the bite zone, they will snap at it so fast you can hardly see them move. What's going on is that alligators are scanning the environment constantly for opportunities and threats. They're more keenly attuned to threats, and we can talk more about that, but that's for survival. And however, the dominant response to everything that they perceive is nothing. And this is just like human beings, our dominant response to everything around us, including all of the influence attempts, dominant response is just ignore it. So what alligators' behavior typically looks like is that they're incredibly, incredibly, incredibly lazy. And if we're trying to predict human beings' behavior and we just take that as the default assumption, we will do a great job of predicting what they're going to do if we just assume people are really lazy. And it's not that you're not willing to do hard work. It's just that there is so much going on. And typically, your conscious mind is always already occupied. So this is the second part. I use the analogy of a judge. Technically, it's system 2. The conscious part of your mind, like a human judge, is slow, deliberative. This is effortful. They can focus on only one thing or like one case at a time, judge, carefully considering evidence pro and con. But like a human judge, this part of our mind is biased and it tries to be rational and it tries to make objective decisions. But what it's biased by most essentially are the snap judgments and rules of thumb and prejudices and habits of the gator. So the gator, this unconscious automatic process, can take care of anything that has become habitual through practice and feels mindless, like any of you who regularly commute in a car to work. And actually, anybody who drives, you can drive without thinking about it almost at all. And it's really dangerous and you can kill people. You can kill yourself when you're learning. It's really complicated. It's really scary. You're like, oh my God, how do people do this? Nobody should be on the road, right? But then through practice, it becomes habitual and you can be, shouldn't be probably on the phone, but you could even feel like you could be texting, right? When you're driving because it feels really, really easy. So when you're trying to influence someone, because the gator part is so quick and because it's effortless, this always happens first. And this is, the reactions include, do I like this person? Is it easy? Is this thing that they're suggesting desirable? Does it jive with what I already think or believe or want? And then the conscious part, which is where any analysis comes in, is only a second guesser and it happens only sometimes. Matthew, would you like me to share a study with judges that I think can illuminate this a bit?
That would be great, Zoe. Thank you.
Okay. There's this study that if you're discussing it with other people is important to know. I'm not going to share the nuances of this part. It's important to know that follow-up work found the effect to be smaller than the initial study was. It wasn't as dramatic, but the effect is still there. This was a study of 1,100 parole decisions by Israeli researchers looking at Israeli courts. I don't think that that's relevant. It's just that there were panels of 3 judges who collectively make parole decisions. So these should be less biased than just one person making parole decisions. And what they found was that at the beginning of the day, there was about a 2/3 chance that a prisoner would be sent home on parole. And that number over the course of the day, it declined to, in the study, around 0. Everybody was going back to jail. There's a spike up to 2/3 again. The number declines again to about 0. There's a second spike, and then to similar high levels, declines again to around 0. In the chat, do you want to take a guess about the spikes? Why would the numbers, and how do you pronounce your name? Batabile. I don't know how to pronounce your name. How do you?
Batabile.
Batabile. Batabile, you're exactly right.
Yep.
These are just meal breaks.
I was
Where
gonna say,
and others of you probably thinking similar thing, right? Oh, and Susan, yes. These are just meal breaks. The judges are using their judge part of their mind, which is conscious, slow, deliberate, effortful. And because it's effortful, it's fatiguing. And you can get mentally tired, you can get physically tired from making difficult decisions. And when you get tired, you don't have that judge faculty available to you anymore. And what happens is all you've got left is the Gator judgments. Gator does what's easy because, again, lazy. And the easy decision about parole is, well, they're criminals, send them back to jail. So if even judges end up in situations where they are dominated by Gator decisions and Gator input, this to me says essentially all of us are Gator people, and just some of us are judge people some of the time. But actually, all of us are Gators all of the time, and we just overrule that sometimes. I'm sure you see so many Gator reactions when you have people in conflict talking to each other, reacting to each other. It's all Gator stuff.
great. Thank you so much for sharing the study and also giving us a really in-depth picture of the Gator versus the judge.
Zoe, would you say that influencing others is an art, a science, or a combination of both?
So this is just opinion, and I would be curious to hear what other people think, but I think it's absolutely both. I know that it's in part a science. I also know that there is no science that can predict human interactions and human reactions to one another in the same way that, say, physics theory can predict how physical bodies interact with one another. And I believe the art part comes from how much context matters and individual personalities and preferences matter. And so we get practice where we get better at being more attuned to the people we're talking with, and we get more we have more self insight as we practice this about the kinds of things that we're good at and that go well for us. And Harvey's saying it's also a natural talent for some people. Yeah, some people are lucky. I was not one of those. And I've been glad to see that none of us have to be naturally talented at it. And all of us can learn to be even better than we are.
So it sounds like a prescription, if we can talk about it in those terms, for being better at influencing others means a much broader lived experience, that one has to be more deliberate at trying to expand one's experiences in order to have that breadth. Would you say that that's at least part of the prescription?
Yeah, a deliberate practice and life experience definitely does help. We don't have to have decades of it. So the people who I teach are at Yale are typically in their 20s, and they can develop a strong acumen and be very influential and persuasive just in a brief period of intentional practice and reflection. And Robin, I see what you're sharing in the chat. I love this frame where you tell parties that nobody knows how a judge is going to decide. It's unpredictable. You can guess, but it's going to be better if you work it out amongst yourselves. It's a very powerful frame. Thank you for sharing that.
So we are open to all kinds of questions here. Feel free to raise your hands if you'd like to ask a question using voice. Robin?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Zoe. I haven't read the book, so I'm struck by how, with whatever training and age and other things that I would hope would make me better at what I do as a mediator, when I'm with my family, it all goes to shit. Pardon my French. So I'm wondering what words of wisdom you have from the science and the art in terms of how we can apply what we know when we ourselves are triggered, perhaps, and not at our best.
Yeah, Robin, it's funny that you say that. I completely relate, and it happens very frequently when I'm teaching workshops with leaders of all different stripes. They're including, CEOs and central bankers, and had a princess come through my class. That the question is like, okay, I get it, and I know some of this, or I'm doing some of this at work, but how do I get my daughter to clean her room? How do I get my son to study? How do I get my child to do this thing? Our closest people will be the hardest people for us to influence, because they will be the most resistant to us. So first of all, just acknowledge that you're not alone, and this is a big challenge for everybody. And when it comes to these close relationships, but I'm pausing because it's not just these, but particularly in close relationships, it's so important to figure out how to have the person we're trying to influence feel a sense of control and freedom of choice. It's good always, but especially in close relationships, whether it's with your employees, your partner, your children, to have them understand which decisions are totally their call. And for adults, almost all decisions will be their call. There might be consequences that wouldn't be good, but even, say it's your employee and there's something that you need them to do, they have to still decide to do it, right? They might not keep working for you if they didn't, but they still have to decide to do it. But especially with kids are very, very high in need for control. And there will be some situations where there's something that they need to do, and there's really not a discussion about what the thing is going to be. It's just this thing that they need to do. Have them understand, are there any aspects of it that can be their decision? Are there any choices that you can offer them? And also be really clear in situations where they do get to decide. And, you have advice or you have preferences, but this is their call. And then if they make a decision that conflicts with your preferences, you let them go ahead and follow through. So they don't have to be in control of every situation, and they shouldn't, right? Because they're children. But if they know that there are multiple specific places where they really do get to decide, they'll be a little more open-minded in the situations where they don't. I hope that's a little bit helpful. And I don't know if there is anything more specific you're thinking of, but any of us on the call who are parents, we can all relate to this.
Yeah, it's a good reminder. And with children, it's certainly the difference between consequences and punishments it's yes, you can do that, and this is what will happen, as opposed to if you do that, I'm going to punish you. It's your consequence.
Yes, and very importantly, punishments are not very effective at influencing long-term behavior, and they're very effective at destroying relationships. And this is from decades of research on rewards and punishments. And like Alan Catchton is a child psychology professor at Yale, who has done enough research to say that spankings, for example, just don't help build the behaviors that you want to build, and they don't have kids not doing the things that you don't want them to do. They just don't do them in your presence.
So one of the lessons that I think you stressed in your book was that one of the best ways to offer suggestions is to give options, alternatives, rather than telling them what the best choice is for people. So the usual, like, I think you should do whatever, which becomes much more prescriptive and directive, and the kind of thing that mediators in particular try to stay away from.
Yeah, I wish everybody would learn that. It's so important, right? To try to not say should ever. And we just don't get this kind of training. And options, besides, we were talking about it in the context of kids and the feeling of a need for control, but this is also really, really useful for adults, not just to give them a sense of control, but to help them evaluate a good option. If you know this is the best possibility out of all of the other options, and you just share this one thing, it's impossible to evaluate in isolation. But if you share, here's what I think is the best option, here's what I think is the second best option, and this is how the first option is even better, then they have something to compare, and it's much easier for them to make a decision. The risk, if you just give them one option, is that they will delay making a decision at all, or they'll just say no because they can't tell. And if they feel like you're trying to persuade them, all of us have what I call this inner 2-year-old that's like, you're not the boss of me. And anytime we feel like someone's trying to push us to do something, and this is the reaction to should, right? When we feel like someone's trying to push us to do something, we're just like, I said no. So having two options helps prevent that, and it helps soothe resistance.
Right. Donna?
Hi, Zoe. I look forward to getting your book. And when we're talking about options, as the ombuds here at Stony Brook University in Long Island, that's the main part of my job, is to help people look at their options and not give direct advice. And just like kids, you're giving them options, they feel like they might have some control. So I think that's interesting. But I was looking you up and I just saw something, and I was curious about what are the 4 P's framework for behavior that you talk about?
I hope you don't mind, but I'm just gonna
Or I'll read
not
about
touch
it
that
later.
one because it just takes a while to explain the
Okay.
idea. And I have a Harvard Business Review piece that explains these areas, but the idea is that there are all these nudges in behavioral economics for people who have been interested in it that are hard. There are hundreds of them, and they say, how do I apply these? And my perspective in creating this framework, that's the one that Google used for their food policy, is to start with what domain of influence do you have? And do you have influence over the process, or do you have influence over what the offerings are? Do you have influence only over yourself, etc.? But that's the general idea.
Okay, thank you. I'll read about it.
Thank you for looking me up and for tolerating my I don't think I'm going to talk about it.
That's okay. It's fine with me.
So I think I'm going to call on Batabile. You have a long chat comment. Batabile, can you voice that? Are is Batabile still on the call?
He's muted.
Batabile, are you muted? I'm not seeing her on my screen. Is anyone seeing her? She may have had to leave.
She's turned off her video, so maybe we can come back to her once
Okay.
she's on again.
Okay, well, while we're waiting, Zoe,
Can I ask a question?
sure.
So Stephanie, you're asking about Stuart Ablin's work on collaborative problem solving, and I've never heard of it.
Oh,
And
hi.
I'm just wondering if you might share briefly what that is, because you have me curious.
Oh, sure. Yeah. He's at Mass General. Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
And thank you for being here in this great presentation. Stuart Ablin does work in collaborative problem solving. It's actually very similar to mediation, but you reminded me of it when you said punishment doesn't work, which is a big philosophy of mine. I work in education. So I've done some training in collaborative problem solving. It's really similar to mediation. You ask questions rather than making demands, but collaborative problem solving is specifically used with young people who are in alternative settings, young people in juvenile detention, places like that. And the goal is to come to a mutually agreed upon result, perhaps with a young person who you might be struggling with, is the best way to put it. So he also, it's for educators and social workers and people like that, but it's also parents take his workshops too. So you reminded me of it when you spoke. So I wondered if there had been any overlap. It's not about, I mean, when you talk about influence, the way you're speaking about it now is much sort of, when you speak of Google and things like that, it's not in that realm so much, although I imagine you could use it. But I think of it more as something we would use with in education and those kinds of settings.
And you find it helpful?
I do, I have. I mean, there are pieces of it, I mean, without getting into a long conversation, that yes, I have found it helpful. This is a short answer. And certainly as an educator, yeah, definitely. And I work with young people who have a lot of struggles. So yes. And so you reminded me of it because punishment doesn't work. And his philosophy is it's skill, not will. There's one way to sort of really sort of be very reductive and give you like philosophy. It's this, if people are lacking skills, they can't do certain things you're asking them to do. It's so sometimes we think someone won't do something, but it's actually they can't. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Nikki, for posting the link. I'm curious to go check it out. And I'm very interested in child psychology from an influence perspective, because there has been a great deal of work on trying to influence kids. And this is almost all of it really, really relevant for adults. And one of my favorite books, I'm going to put this in the chat as well, this is my favorite parenting book by far. But this is really, really helpful just for relating to people and even relating at work. It's called Playful Parenting. And the idea is that when you have warm feelings on both sides, and when you're being imaginative and when you're laughing, you just can't be in conflict with each other. So I'm not somebody who is, and as everyone here has noticed, like, I haven't said anything funny yet. I'm just not a naturally funny person. I really appreciate those who are, but this particular book has helped me have a better sense of humor with my students and with my daughter and stuff. It's great. And there are very specific games that you can play, and this part is just for kids, but there are specific games that you play that have kids feeling powerful, that are really, really cool and super fun.
Batabile, yes.
Hi, Batabile.
Hi, Zoe. I'm so sorry. My timing was just off. I have to take a bio break. So in terms of my question, would you want me to read it out loud and then discuss, elaborate on it, or just elaborate on it?
If you could just ask it verbally, I've actually lost it with the other questions that came
Sure.
after.
Okay, so what I wrote was influence doesn't require an intent to change minds though, right? For example, I think that the best social media influencers are not those who quote unquote preach to their audience, but simply live their best lives in really deliberate ways so that the person who changes their mind believes they're doing so because it makes sense to them and they want to, rather than because the influencer told them to. And of course, I acknowledge that I haven't read your book yet, so I don't know if you directly addressed that already.
I'm glad you're asking about what influence is, because we started talking about it without agreeing on any definition of it. And there can be many definitions of it, but part of the answer to your question is it depends where you draw the line. And I use a very broad definition of influence, which is anything that changes somebody's thinking or changes somebody's behavior. So that doesn't require conscious intent. It doesn't require that they know that you're trying to influence them. It also, in many cases, doesn't require that you are influencing their thinking at all. You can, for example, just make things easier and influence people's behavior a great deal. And that's actually the biggest thing you can do to influence someone's behavior. But I think that your question is also getting at that reality that when we're telling people what to do, they're likely to resist it, and there may even be backlash. There's a funny situation that happened at Google, which is part of the reason that their food team brought me on to help them with their policies. People hate being told what to do so much that they will sometimes revolt against things that seem really innocuous and inconsequential. Google was doing a pilot program of this Meatless Monday idea that a lot of organizations in the US and then around the world did, where the idea is just on Monday, you eat plant-based meals, and then you get to experience the fact that they can be healthy and they can be, they can be healthy. They can be filling and they can be delicious. Okay, great. So there was no animosity there. However, when you think about that frame of Meatless Monday, you're telling people we're taking your meat away, and people react very strongly to having things taken away. You're telling them also essentially, because you're a bad person, you're bad, you meat eater. So there was a revolt at Google where the Meatless Monday pilot program was only during the month of September, and it was only in one of the 24 cafes at their headquarters, and it was not even including fish. So they still had fish. They just took away the chicken and the beef. But what employees did, besides writing scathing emails to HR and the food team laden with curse words and saying we're going to go work at Facebook or Microsoft where they don't F with us, they had a pig roast in the parking lot and of that one cafe, and they came into that cafe to get the plates, the cups, the napkins, etc. So not only is it possible to influence people without using persuasion, but it's persuasion that has the chance of backfiring like that. And persuasion is the type of influence that relates to spoken and written communication with words.
So Seth, related to that, Sethu has a question in the chat. A mediator's influence is often felt deeply in nonverbal communication, in their presence and how actively they listen and move a situation along. And wondering if you could speak about influence of this quieter kind.
Thank you. I feel very strongly about influence of quiet kinds and the influence of quiet people. And it's probably because I'm an introvert, and I meet and work with a lot of introverts who feel that maybe they don't get to be as influential and believe that they definitely don't get to be as charismatic as someone who's more extroverted, outgoing. And I know that's not entirely what you were talking about when you said influence of this quiet kind. The judgments that we have of one another that are the gator snap judgments that I was talking about earlier are based in very large part on kinds of nonverbal cues, like somebody's facial expression, like somebody's tone of voice. And there's really interesting research. I mean, obviously I like this stuff because that's what I study, but I find it really interesting in this area that's called thin slices, where researchers will give somebody a tiny sample of another human being, and it might be a visual sample. Like I'll share two totally separate studies, or it might be an auditory sample. It might be a video. And people who perceive these tiny, tiny slices of other human beings have snap judgments that predict other people's judgments and behavior over the long term. And that's kind of abstract. So here's what I mean. In a study of election results, this was Alex Todorov at Princeton, showed people candidates' faces, and they didn't even know who they were looking at or why, but this was candidates in gubernatorial races from other states. They showed pictures of candidates' faces, and they said, who looks more competent between these two people? And the competence judgments had a predictive power of 70% of elections, just depended on who looks more competent. And there can be all kinds of bias that goes into that, right? And it's not just things like facial expression, but those snap judgments of competence predicted election outcomes. There was a follow-up study by John Antonakis in Switzerland who did this with kids. And instead of asking who's more competent, he showed people, and this was, I guess it was Swiss, but it might have been French parliamentary election. So kids have no idea who these two people are. And they say, who would you prefer to be captain of your boat? And again, 70% of the election outcomes were predicted by these kids choosing captains of boats. So this gives some support to the idea that these gator snap judgments of nonverbal stuff are incredibly powerful. And a study that I found really interesting about tone of voice was, this was research by Nalini Ambati, and she was interested to see if people could predict which surgeons were sued for malpractice. So she gave 10-second audio clips of different surgeons talking to their patients, and then she had participants predict which of these surgeons had been sued for malpractice. I can't give you the exact number, but it was surprisingly predictive, on the order of something like 70%. But these audio clips had no words in them. The words had been garbled, and all that you could hear was the tone of voice that the surgeon used when talking with their patient. So it was the tone of voice that mattered even more than the actual surgical outcome. If we like somebody, we feel respected by them, we trust them, we believe that they would have done the best job that they could, even if things didn't go well, we're not likely to sue them for malpractice. And if things went a little bit and we didn't trust them, that's when we think about jumping in to do that. The thing that's challenging for those of us who want to improve all of our communication, but especially our nonverbals, is that we can get very self-conscious when we're thinking of like, okay, what do I look like and how do I sound? And then we're kind of in our head and we're not connecting with the other person. So if you are wanting to practice things like dropping your tone of voice to your natural low register, this conveys confidence, and it also helps connect with people because it shows that you're comfortable, which means that you trust them and they can trust you. If you want to practice doing that, then I suggest that you do it on the phone rather than in person. It's much easier, and it's also totally fun.
So thank you, Zoe. There's a question in the chat that brings us back to the title of the book. Chris Berry asked, what exactly is the superpower?
The superpower is having other people want to say yes to you. And this is what it takes to bring any of your great ideas to life and to do almost any of the things that you care about maybe except for spiritual enlightenment. But you need to have someone, maybe it's just yourself, wanting to say yes to you. So these are the influence techniques that I study and teach. And I try to focus on strategies that are comfortable on both sides so that it feels comfortable to use them. A lot of us have mixed feelings about the idea of influence, and especially influence strategies or influence tactics. And at taking it further, like being salesy, most of us don't want to be that person. We don't want to be like social media influencers. A few people do and find that aspirational, but most of us think like, oh, these are people who are just trying to get something from me. And I don't want to make people feel like I'm just trying to get something from them. So this is why I focus on having people want to say yes to you rather than that you get them to do the thing that you want. This is relationship based rather than transaction based.
And a related question in the chat from Claudia Frankel Grossman, I believe. Yeah. Can we use this superpower to understand our limits? What to do next?
Claudia, I'd love to ask you to elaborate on that because I'm not sure exactly what you're thinking, but I'm curious.
Nice. Hello, everyone. Zoe, really nice to hear you. I'm looking forward to read your book and lots of the other things that you suggested. My idea here is that in my experience as a mediator, I'm trying to put the techniques of the book in my practice, which is very interesting exercise. And what I feel sometimes is that the people in nowadays are trying to negotiate much more in the limit that they can. So they got exhausted. And when they come to mediation, here in Brazil is lots of that, they come in a very damage zone. So they are really in their limits even to talk together. So can we use this superpower? I think nowadays, one of the superpowers, I think, is recognizing our limits, our own limits because of the involvement. So because you are a part of the relationship, and you have lots of bias that you can sometimes even think about it. So can we use the superpower or your techniques to understand our limits and what to do if we do recognize our limit of going on this negotiation or on this influence?
I don't know what the label is for what it takes to recognize our limits, but I'm absolutely 100% with you on the importance of recognizing when we're hitting a wall and recognizing when we're getting burnt out and we're trying to negotiate with someone else. And maybe we're emotional, maybe we're angry, maybe we're just exhausted, and it can have all kinds of bad outcomes, right? Like you're talking about and experiencing, we can end up just capitulating and saying to the other person, like, okay, fine, forget it, you take everything, right? Or we can end up really pissing them off because we're aggressive. And so you as a mediator, and I expect you already do this, but you as a mediator can help your clients to be recognizing when they're getting into a state where burnout, depletion, exhaustion, frustration has put them into gator territory, like in that judge study where they wanted to be making these careful decisions, but they got exhausted. And then it's just the gator doing things that are easy. So it's easy to capitulate, or it's easy to snap at somebody, or it's easy to draw a line. There can be different ways that the gator behaves, but they're not going to be in those parties' best interest. So you can help them to have, I love the frame that you already shared of sometimes all they can do is just to be in the room. So maybe you can help them at the beginning have the goal of just don't leave. Like, I don't know if there's anyone on the call with us who's ever done Bikram yoga. I'm not really that crazy or that much of a badass, but it's like 120 degrees and it's really, really hard and you're sweating like crazy and classes are like 2 hours long, I think it's awful. However, what I love is the teachers tell you the goal is to stay in the room, and you can do that. And so you can help your clients, you can help both parties set a low bar by just having the goal of stay in the room, or just have the goal of let's have each side share their idea, share their experience, share their request. Let's not decide anything. Let's just have the goal that we hear them and that we get to share. A lot of what I encourage people to do as leaders on the path of influence is to help people have high hopes and low expectations. So the hope is that we come out of this thing to be resolved where both parties are happy, right? That might not be able to happen. The expectation is that this is a success if nobody left the room, right? And when you're talking about just burnout in general and frustration, anxiety, and all of us, not every individual, but every culture all over the world has, already higher rates of burnout, anxiety, and depression than we have since whatever the last war was that we had in our country. And so it's very, very common that even people just showing up on a regular workday are already burnt out, exhausted, at the end of their rope. I can't even imagine what it's like to be a conflict mediator, where these people have already been butting heads before they come to you, but you can help them be understanding how each party can be making worse decisions when they're in a state of high emotions and exhaustion. And it's not in their best interest to have the other party making a decision that's bad for them, that they will then regret, and then they will try to get out of. So of course, I'm not telling you anything new, but the idea is that you want to come to an agreement that both parties will be happy with then and be happy to stick with. So just things like pauses, right? When somebody gets emotional, checking in with people to see how they're feeling, and trying to get them on board with the idea that they don't want the other party to be making rash decisions from an emotional or an exhausted space. But I feel, I don't know if I can feel empathy because I don't do the work, but I feel sympathy and a lot of intense emotions imagining being in the situation that you're in. And I really appreciate that work.
Let me ask, is it easier to change minds or behaviors? And why?
It's usually easier to change behaviors.
And why is that?
That people, they don't want their minds to be changed, and they're often actively fighting against that. And the majority of our behavior, it can't be quantified, but researchers estimate that 90% of our behavior is gator driven. Mm-hmm. So the majority of the time, we're not even consciously aware of the things that we're doing because we're just doing them. And we're definitely not aware of most of the reasons that we're doing the things that we do. Like if you would ask those judges, why did you let this prisoner out on parole? And why did you send that one back to jail? They will have rational explanations, of course. But the process that they were doing to get there was rationalizing. So a lot of our behavior is rationalized rather than reasoned, and it comes from things that we prefer to do or things that are easier to do, things that we already believe. There's this metric that is from marketing, and you're not in marketing, and it's not important that you would know what it's called or use this metric. But it's one of the most important marketing metrics because it predicts business outcomes so well. And this is called the customer effort score. It essentially comes down to just one question, which is how much effort did it take to do whatever it was they were trying to do, to buy the thing, to get service, to get your question answered. The amount of effort that it takes is a better predictor of things like customer loyalty, increased spending, negative word of mouth. It's a better predictor than customer satisfaction. It's a better predictor than the main metric marketers use, which is, it's called Net Promoter Score, has to do with word of mouth. And effort predicts almost all the difference between who complains about a company and who doesn't complain about a company. So this is more than how did it actually go and how happy were you with the outcome. What really makes people complain is how difficult was it to get that outcome. And an important thing about this is that it's not, when I say it's how difficult was it, it's actually perceived effort rather than actual effort, like the actual amount of time it took. As long as people feel like it's easy or feel like it's going to be easy. So ease is the biggest driver of behavior, going back again to the lazy alligators. And when you want to influence someone's behavior, the best thing you can do is make it as easy as possible and to focus on the next step. So if you're in a mediation or some other type of conflict resolution situation, there's going to be some grand goal that you hope to get to, but where you focus your influence is on the very next step. So what is it that we need to do to get to the next place and get to the next place? And there's far less resistance to taking a baby step. And there you get to build momentum, and you don't, importantly, create that reactance and resistance inner 2-year-old. You're not the boss of me, when you're just leading them toward the next baby step, which you'll know what that is. And it's very helpful for soothing resistance and anger and things like that. And that may be exactly what you're already doing in conflict resolution. And I wish I knew more about what the traditional processes are. I hope I'm not just repeating stuff. That's everything you do.
No, thank you. Definitely giving me something to think about.
So how do we?
Oh, I just noticed, sorry. Stephanie, thank you so much. I just saw in the chat, I'm seeing some comments in the chat and I'm missing a bunch, but you're saying you hope you can influence me to say incarcerated person instead of criminal or prisoner. I really appreciate that. And I haven't had that in my consciousness as a frame that I'm using that's just unconscious and not helpful. Incarcerated person.
It's just people first language, like when you say a person who is
like people with
homeless.
disabilities.
Exactly.
And yes.
Similar.
Yes.
Yep. Thank you.
Incarcerated person.
Or a person who's incarcerated. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, not to police language, but I think you know what I mean.
I really appreciate it. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
And my plan is to change that from this moment on. And I may have some lapses, but I will do my best.
We're all trying to do our best.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
So yes, you have influenced me. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
So a big question is that people do have their go-to, whether it's language or negotiation skills. And I'm wondering if there's a way that we can think about how to easily deal with change of those go-to skills, go-to language. I mean, do we start with people at a young age? How do we deal with adults? I mean, are there different techniques that we use at different stages? Thoughts?
Are you thinking that there's a problem with go-to language and go-to skills?
Well,
like if you have things that work, that sounds great.
Well, sometimes they don't always work. They may work with certain people, you know, they may be very time or context specific. You could yell at one person and it works, but yell at someone else and it's going to backfire and lead to the malpractice suit or whatever, because you were rude or whatever. So,
Well, I would try not having yelling be a go-to practice, but I don't think that's what you were suggesting. But I think what you're saying, now that I'm understanding it a little bit better, is just how can we be more flexible to be sensitive to differences in context and individual differences and things like that. Is that right?
well, it seems as though these skills are just so vital for everyday life. And it seems as though, and we're not surprised, that people do have their go-to, whether it's language skills, whatever. How can we create an environment where people are more open to other go-to skills? It's sort of getting to the heart of what you're talking about. How can we influence others to do something differently?
So what Stephanie just did was exactly that. So Stephanie just demonstrated exactly that. A lot of times we're not conscious of our go-to language or go-to skills. So I wasn't conscious that I'm using language that isn't, it's nothing I chose, right? I wasn't choosing to say prisoners or criminals, but I say that. And now I'm hearing it in my head. I'm like, oh yeah, that's awful. No, I don't want to be that person. But Stephanie asked in such a warm, friendly way. She says, I hope I can influence you. And she has a little happy face emoticon there, right? So I can tell that if she was in conversation with me, if she were, she would be saying like, hey, Zoe, I know you don't mean anything by this, but it kind of strikes the wrong note when I hear you call people prisoners, etc., instead of using people first language, like people are incarcerated. And I hope you might consider shifting that. I'd be like, yes, of course, right? Like I just did. So that's one big thing, is just helping other people that you notice having some kind of habit that maybe doesn't serve them or doesn't serve other people, and pointing it out in a very gentle way, like Stephanie did, so they can hear it. She wasn't being aggressive or critical or anything, right? Just helpful. And a mindset to have that I believe can be helpful for all of us is that being influential requires being influenceable. If you were trying to be influential without being influenced by other people, that would just be insane. And when you're open to other people's influence, then you get to get better. Like, so it's important in general, but then also in a specific context where you're hoping to influence another person, being open to their influence on you is the secret sauce that it takes to have them like you, trust you, be open to your ideas, listen to your ideas. We don't want to have other people just come in and tell us what to do. But we build a lot more trust and rapport by being open to that. And I guess one other thing I'll put out there related to this and bigger things is when you're experimenting with doing things that are new, you're going to fail. And if you are not failing sometimes at things that you care about, it's a sign that you're playing small. So when you make a mistake, get embarrassed, fall on your face, fail to have the outcome that you wanted, maybe you could rewire your mind to interpret this as a sign that you are growing and you are playing big and you're trying things that were risky because you hadn't tried them before. And it doesn't mean that you're gonna be like, oh yeah, I'm awesome, I failed. But it helps a lot to just remember, if you're not failing, it's a sign that you're playing small.
Thanks. Kent?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Zoe. Your discussion about baby steps a moment ago, I'm going to invite you to bring that thinking into sort of the mediator world that a lot of us share. we all get to moments where we hear the magical words, I'm not negotiating against myself. I mean, if I don't hear that in every mediation, I'm disappointed. And we get to a point where everybody's been heard. We go through all the exercises. Everybody goes to their corner and puts up their dukes, comes out with this is my last position kind of situation. And you have loggerheads and you hear the magic words, I'm not negotiating against myself. I'm not taking the first step. I am not giving any concession, even if concession is rational and it can lead to settlement. But it's you talked about baby steps. We hear I'm not taking the first step. And mediators have a toolbox for ways of dealing with that sort of stuff. But I'd love to hear how you would say, we just want a little baby step here when people are at loggerheads and they're not, a concession to the other side is like a defeat. I wish I hadn't come to this meeting because I've been defeated. I made a concession. How do you approach that? I'd love some superpower influence at that moment. And I think a lot of other mediators would as well.
So I hope I can empower you with a superpower. I'll think of a couple of things. And it sounds like you already have a toolbox for handling this situation. But the first thought would just be that the baby step is probably smaller than a concession. The baby step is probably something even smaller, like staying in the room, agreeing on the location that we're going to have our next conversation. Like there are loads and loads of baby steps that are smaller than giving up something that's meaningful to me. It might also be helpful that that both parties know in advance of the whole discussion that it will be that they are likely to end up at loggerheads if they can't make concessions. So the high hopes and low expectations kind of, one way that would come up if I were a total novice trying to help mediate a conflict is that I would just be letting both parties know, go ahead and dream big, and you can think about all of the things that would be helpful for you to have. And when whatever it is that you're asking for at the beginning, if you're not able to make some concessions from that, then the other party is going to dig in their heels and they're not going to be able to make any concessions either. So let's throw a bunch of ideas out there, but this is whatever it is that you're asking for, we're not going to end up there, right? And be thinking about what is it, as you're thinking of things that would make you really happy, right? What are things that you could do or offer or agree to that would make the other party happy, that wouldn't cost you a great deal? And those are the kinds of things that we'll be trying to get to at the beginning while we build momentum to coming to the really difficult decision. But like, this is probably already part of your toolbox. I don't know. Robin is saying, I just saw this in the chat. This is a really nice baby step. Maybe the first baby step is to have the parties state each other's position and why that person wants what they want. I love this as a baby step. And that's exactly the kind of example of something that's not a concession, but it's a step toward getting to a place where they'll be willing to make concessions.
Thank you. Ellen? You're muted.
Good. Back to the question about criminal versus
Incarcerated people.
Incarcerated people.
Yeah.
And what we referred to was if it is presented to you in a way that is respectful and playful, that you can receive it. What if it's not presented to you in that way? What if
it's hard, right?
Under attack, and you take the full brunt of this attack? How do you then take it upon yourself to get to the same result that you wanted to in the first place, which is an examination of your own stance?
probably all of us have had these kinds of situations where you get criticism that would be helpful, but it is wrapped in a very unhelpful package that just makes us defensive. And I believe that I am probably the professor where I teach at Yale School of Management who has had more complaints about them about prejudice of various types than any other professor. I've been accused of sexism, racism, homophobia, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and prejudice against disabled people. Probably other kinds of things. And the reason that this comes up in all these various contexts is we talk about all of this stuff, and we talk about politics, and we talk about power, and we talk about bias. And I'll just say, like, I have people, my most beloved people in my nuclear family who are Muslim, who are Jewish. I'm bisexual. I'm a feminist, and and I've been accused of elitism and classism, and I grew up very poor. But when I get these complaints, some of them are kind of like Stephanie's, where like a student will come up to me after class and say, I don't think that you realize it, Zoe, probably, but when you just said, like, this thing that you said, you were assuming that this woman's partner was going to be a man. And as a queer person, I just feel a little uncomfortable with that. And then it's easy to go, oh my gosh, of course I didn't mean to do that. And I will change my language. I have changed my teaching and my language after just about all of these complaints and situations. But there are other students who will go immediately to the dean. And then I get a message from the dean, and the deans love me and we get along really well. But the message from the dean will say, hey, you heard from a student that you have this attendance policy that is actually really hard for the Jewish students who have two of their religious holidays falling on class days, and they wanted a special exception, and here's why. And the student could have just come to me and explained it, but it's hard to come and complain to someone who has power over you. And then have other situations where I, like one really memorable student, I had a student scream at me in class about being racist. And that was really, really, really awkward. And I, handled it as well as I could in the moment. And I'm sure I'm blushing and embarrassed. And the thing that she was bringing up, we should have had, in a perfect world, a 20-minute conversation about it, and it would have been helpful. But class is about to end, and I needed to say this is the assignment for next time. So I wasn't graceful at all. But I just need to take time and wait until I'm not angry anymore, or wait until I'm not embarrassed or offended or whatever it is. And when I'm not in gator mode. So when I'm in gator mode, I'm just not going to handle this really well. So I try to just like, okay, thank you. We can talk about it later. And then once I have time, and once I have refreshed mentally, physically, whatever it took to consider this. But I would say in almost every context where I'm getting criticized, there's something helpful behind that. Because for most people, especially in a professional situation, unless they have power over you, then it's easy for them to criticize. And even then there might be nuggets of truth. But when people are sharing criticism in professional contexts, they've considered, and it's risen above a certain bar where it was really, really important to them. So I try to step back, chill out, listen, and get better, because I'm always trying to get better. But the only thing I can do in a lot of situations where there's just like criticism right then in the moment is just not react. I'm not going to react gracefully. Just try to not react in the moment. You probably have some other, and Chris is saying a lot of what you're saying seems like elaborate common sense. The science and the art of influence is at its basis the fundamental thing that we do as people. And what I'm trying to do here in this conversation and in the book that I've written in the course that I teach is the elaboration part of it, which can give a deeper and more nuanced understanding so that we can be even more effective and so that we can teach other people. But we can also, if you want, get into some more specific strategies if you feel like you're not getting that. And Chris, I encourage you to ask about it if you like.
And on that note, I am going to
it's 10.
do what we usually do at 10 o'clock, officially adjourn the formal part of the breakfast. Thank you so much, Zoe, for stimulating us to think more creatively about our superpower. And Zoe has agreed to stay on for about 15 minutes. So for those of you who would like to stay on, we will stay on for at least 15 minutes informally, continue chatting, but we are turning off the recording. Nikki, can you stop the recording? And now we are off the record here.